Hello? Hello, 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 hello. Okay, cool. Hello,
Hello?
can people hear me?
Yes.
Seems like it. Cool, okay. Got a couple more minutes, so I'll wait a few more minutes to see who else shows up. This is my first time trying to present as a Zoom presenter, so bear with me. I have I actually have two things going. I have my computer where I'll be presenting, so that's the one that right now just has my name and doesn't have any picture, and then I have my phone going with my ugly nose that I scraped up running the other day. So that's where you're hearing me from, because my computer doesn't have a video on it. Wow, lots of people. Nice. I'm glad there was interest in this. Thank you all for being here. So just to make sure this is that everybody knows where we're at, this is the course setting seminar. So we're going to be talking about how to set beginner courses today. And I only had this scheduled for about a half an hour because it's the free Zoom, which only gives you like 40 minutes. And then I'm hoping to get through white and yellow. And if we don't, then next week we'll pick up wherever we left off.
На следующей неделе хочет, если не успеем. Мама, а что ты делаешь? Зачем?
Okay. So I am going to share my screen here. How do I do this? First, I guess I want to do this. Okay. Oh, wait. Oh, boy, that's in the way of what I want here. That's in the way.
У него 22.
Hang on, I'm going to have to stop this for a minute while I get this doing what I want to do. Okay. More people. Let's try again.
Okay, here we go. Here we go. Okay, I'm gonna say goodbye. Okay, bye.
Okay. Now can people see my presentation? Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, looks like you can see the presentation now. Okay, cool. Unfortunately, I'm not sure I can see my controls anymore to know who needs to get into the, let's see. I need to make sure that I can still see who needs to get into the meeting. Oh, there's some more people who need to get into the meeting. We'll let them in. Okay. Let me put this over here.
7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12.
Okay.
Тут 15 людей, пап.
All right. So if you don't have a question to ask or something, please mute yourself. Okay. That would be helpful. All right. So this is course setting seminar 1, setting for beginners. Wow, lots of people here. It's good to see so much interest in learning course setting. Hopefully we'll get more course setting out of this. Yay. I know we've got a number of people from Los Angeles and some from San Diego. I don't know if there's people from other places. But but we're glad to have you here, and hopefully you'll learn something. Hopefully it will be useful to you. Okay, so resources. I have this course setting handout. In fact, let me, let's see if I can, when this is over, I will try to put into the chat or something. I will send out a, how do I put this in the chat? I want to put the, get out of this. I want to put the slides where you can get them. So I'm going to go to my chat. Where's the chat here? Who knows how to do this? Who can help me? Is there a way to get to chat while I'm sharing?
Hi.
Hi.
Hi, this is Margaret.
Hi, Margaret. If I've got a link I want to share with everybody who's on my thing, what's the best way to do it?
I don't know how
Who knows? Oh, here we go. Chat. There we go. Okay. So I can put it here. All right. So I just shared a link, which is a link to the slides that I'm showing.
Okay.
Okay. Okay. So if you want to look at the slides, that's where you can find them. And then in there's this other link to this course setting handout. The course setting handout looks like, that's not it. It's, do I even have it up here? I don't have it up here. Anyway, okay, it's, but so that's got some of the information in it we're talking about today, plus a lot more, because it's going to take a couple seminars to cover everything in that handout. All right, so let's talk about what a course setter does. So the course setter pretty much has three main tasks.
I understand. That's the same thing. What is a link? Even though you can click on the
Please
website,
mute yourself, whoever's talking there.
that's the same way how what we
Okay, let's see. I should be able to mute people. I'm muting everyone.
Please come in. We're here.
Okay. Can you still hear me?
Yes.
Okay, great, cool. All right.
Oh,
This one. Can you still hear me? Now you should be able to. Okay, cool. You need to design the course, figure out where you want to put controls. Depending upon how you like it, you can, most people, I like to do that first at home, sitting in front of a map and just kind of plan it out. Or there are some people who prefer to actually go out to where the map is and wander around and look for what they think looks good there while they're carrying the map. But either way, you usually start by getting something down and say, here's what looks good to me. Then if you did not already do it, when you plan the course, you need to get out to the terrain and check it, make sure it works. That's a really important part of the job of the course setter, is to physically go there before the actual day of the event and make sure that what you're planning actually works. Because the map changes, things change. Sometimes there's a trail that looks like it goes through, it doesn't, whatever. You want to make sure that whatever you're doing is going to work. So don't plan on a map and then wait till the day of the event to actually go out there to see what it's going to be. And then the third part is to actually place the controls on the day of the event, or if it's a big event, the course setter might just be supervising that. You might have other people who are putting on, who are helping you to put out controls, and you're just coordinating, who's going to go to which ones, making sure that they get them in the right place, that kind of thing. If you're doing a big event like that, usually it's good when you're doing step 2, when you go to the terrain, you put out little tags, like take survey tape or pin flags or whatever works for the site that you're at, and put something at the place where you plan to put the control later. That way, when you get to actually putting the controls, you don't have to think about whether or not you're in the right place. You already have something that's there to show you this is where I was going to put the control. You can just put it there without having to think so hard about it. Or if you send somebody else, you don't have to worry about whether they're in the right place. They just find what you put out, find your tag and say, okay, I'm in the right place. And then they know to put the control there. All right. Number one, most important thing about course setting is that when you're designing a course, you're designing course legs. It's not about where do I put a control. Orienteering is about the problem that you've set up for somebody getting from one control to the next one. So when you're looking at the map or in the terrain and thinking about how do you want to set your controls, don't just think about, oh, here's a rock that would be a nice place to put a control. It's about where is somebody going to go in getting from one to the next one, and have you set up the appropriate type of problem for them in doing that. So you want to look at the line between the controls and what that entails in order to decide if where you're going is what you want to do. So it's about defining those lines, and then at the end of the line, figuring out, okay, here's a good spot to actually put a flag. A lot of times when I design, I will plan an area. I'll draw like a kind of a bigger circle sort of on my map, or maybe I'll circle something specific, but it's not so much about I want to go to that specific thing as I want to go to this area. And then when I actually go to the terrain, I might use the circle that I actually put, but I might find some other thing nearby that I think is better as the place to actually put the control, as long as I know that I still got that leg that I planned. Okay, so white. Here in Los Angeles, we call our white course basic. We call it white. We also label it basic. Whenever we put out our courses, we always have two labels on them, the color and then something that kind of gives an idea of the level. We don't call it beginner. We call it basic because we want people to feel like, yes, they know it's a simple course, but not to feel like they can't stay on it for a little while if they're still learning skills. We don't want people, sometimes people show up who feel like, oh, I'm not a beginner, I've learned something before. And if you call it beginner, they automatically will choose not to do it. And we want to encourage people, at least their very first time, to try the white course. If they're really good, if they really understand things, they'll be done fast enough that we'll then let them go out on a yellow course as a second course anyway. If you're setting more than one course, I recommend that you start first by setting your white course. Design that as the first thing you do. And the reason to do that is logistical. Because when you set your courses, white is the one that has the most constraints. It has to be simple. It has to be on easy handrails and trails. So there aren't as many places where you can put it. So you need to use your white course to decide, for example, where are we going to put the start and the finish for our event. Unless you're, if you're doing a huge event with lots of starts and finishes, that might be different. But if you're only doing a small local event with one of each course and you don't have a lot of volunteers, you probably just want a single start and finish. And the best way to decide where to put those is going to be by designing your white course first and figuring out where do you want those things to go to work well for your basic course. And then you can work everything else around that. You're going to want to also consider in deciding where to put your course, where people are parking. Do they want to walk a long way from their parking? Again, depending upon what type of event it is. If it's a big national meet, people are willing to walk further from their car to get to starts and finish. If it's a local thing, you don't want to put people off by having them show up and then say, okay, and now it's a kilometer walk to get to the start. So you want to try to put your start and finish closer to the parking if it's a smaller event. Also, you want to think about if it's a large event, maybe it's important to have an arena. So if that matters, if it matters that you have a place for lots of people to gather and spectate, you're going to want to put your start and finish closer to that. So those are a lot of reasons to start by making sure that you figure out your white course before you worry about other courses, because you don't want to plan stuff that works for advanced people and then realize it won't work for your most basic course. All right. So on my handout, you'll see that for each course I've come up with a keyword. And for white, the keyword is easy. It needs to be easy. Okay, in fact, my very last bullet here is the white course cannot be too easy. If you're at all worried about it, make it easier. Okay, because the whole point of the white course is to let people kind of dip their toe in the water, see it, get an idea what orienteering is about, and have a good time. And if it's not easy enough, if they start getting frustrated or getting lost, then they're not going to have a good time. They're not going to come back. We want people to have a good time and to enjoy it. If they think it's too easy when they get back, you can always let them go out again on a more difficult course to have a more difficult experience. Winning time is 20 to 30 minutes. So winning time for all courses in the United States is defined as meaning how long it would take if the best person in the country showed up and did your course. That doesn't necessarily, you're right, that person probably won't be at your local meet. But a lot of times for local events, in order that things don't feel too long or too hard, we just we just look for somebody local to hit that winning time. For white, usually you find some kid who runs fast enough that they hit that. That winning time is more important than this suggested distance, right? Here I say 2 to 3 kilometers, but that's in parentheses. That's a suggestion of approximately what will help you get that winning time. In fact, at a 2 kilometer course, you'll probably have the fastest person will probably be faster than that. And that's fine. The one thing that's important at local meets a lot of the time is to make sure that it's at least a mile, because Boy Scouts often show up and they want to meet their first class requirement, and that requires that their course be at least a mile long. So try to make sure that the white course is at least a mile. That way you can always tell the Boy Scouts, yeah, you can do the white course, it'll meet your requirement. The course should stay on obvious handrails, and you might need to go to the terrain to determine if something is obvious or not. But that typically means trail most of the time. At least in California, that typically means trails. There are some, out in the eastern part of the country, there's sometimes obvious old walls through the woods or things like that. There might be fences that are obvious. Stream, if it's one that really is carrying a little bit of water on a regular basis and it's easy to follow. A stream bed, if again, it's a really good one. Out here in California, lots of times stream beds are dry, and somebody who is newer might not always recognize what's the stream bed. So be careful with what you have people following. But the white course should have something to follow all of the time. A couple of exceptions. If you have to, it's okay to cross open terrain to a visible control. So that means like you get to a field and maybe the trail kind of disappears in the field, but you can put a control on a tree in the middle of the field or on the opposite corner of the field, where when you hit the field, you see that the control's there. So then there's no doubt what direction I need to go across the field. I'm just going to where the control is. Another thing you can do is if you need to take people to get from one trail to another and there isn't a handrail there, you can make one. You can put streamers in the woods and tell people, make sure it's on the control descriptions, make sure it's on the meet information. You're going to have to follow some streamers at one point on the white course. And then they get to a control, they follow the streamers until they hit the next trail, they keep going. There should be, in order to make this easy enough, there should be a control at every decision point. So the idea is that while you want people to kind of become aware of decision points, the course should sort of lead themselves through it. I like to, when I'm planning a white course, try to pretend like I'm 5 years old and run down the trail going, yay, thinking about how can I easily do that? Can I easily just run down this trail and not be going off of it? right? If there's a place where you're doing that and all of a sudden the trail seems to disappear, then you need to do something to make it clear, either put a control or align the trail, to do something to make sure that somebody that a 5-year-old running down it isn't going to get lost following that trail. And then when a control's coming up, as they approach it, they should be able to, that 5-year-old should be able to point at that control, say, look, there it is, and go run over to it to get ready to punch it. And after they've punched it, they should be able to just start running again and not really have to think that hard about which direction they're going. So when you need them to turn, you want to put the control in a place that sort of forces that turn so that they're not going to get lost doing that. Okay. So the control should be on the handrail or visible from it. It's nice to get people a little bit off, you know, give them a sense of, ooh, I'm going in the woods. I had to take 5 steps off of the trail to get to my control, but it still needs to be easily visible. So as you're running down that trail, you say, look, there it is, and it's there. At the start, make sure that the white course faces the direction you want them to go. It's preferable that that's about the same direction that everyone else is going, because if white's facing one way and everybody else is going 90 degrees different from them, you run the risk that those white people are going to think they're wrong and follow everyone else, and you don't want them to do that. So make sure it's really clear at the start, the way you set up the maps, the way you set up the start chute, that white people start out facing on the handrail that they need to follow in the direction you want them to go to get to that first control. If necessary, make that control be visible from the start. Okay, can't be too easy. All right, but it's also important to keep in mind that at some point, people are going to leave the white course and move up to yellow. So you want to do some things on it that help them to move up. So one way to do that is to make sure you use a variety of control features. You don't want your control descriptions to be path junction, path junction, path junction, path junction, path road junction. Okay, because then all they're learning to do is read paths. And if the control features are things like, oh, there's a tree, look, there's a boulder, look, there's a ruin, there's a vegetation junction, here you're at a stream. Even though those things might be right along the trail, so they don't have to get off the trail to find them, by using them as your control features, you help to ensure that the competitor is paying attention to other things around them and on the map, and learning more about how to read the map and how to read those other features that they'll need when they move up. You want to get them a little bit off of the trail at controls if you can, right? So again, you know, oh, it's on a tree, and even if that tree is just a few steps off the trail, you're getting at the fact that, okay, orienteering is a little bit of an off-trail sport. You might need to take a few steps off the trail to get to your control. You can still see it from there. You can still get to it, but it makes them you're starting to develop a little bit of comfortableness with going off trail. The last thing is to push recognition of decision points and handrails. So helping the competitor to learn to recognize those things on the map that are the things they're following. So decision point, one way to do that is maybe you get to a trail junction and the control isn't quite right there, but once you're at that junction, you'll see it, but it's just a little bit down the trail you need to go to. So you get to the trail junction, you notice, uh-oh, I'm at a junction, which way do I go? You look left, you see a control. It pushes the idea of recognizing that, okay, there was a place here where I had to think about this. So that, because when you move up to yellow, that's going to be the main difference, is having to actually make that decision without being able to see a control. And recognition of handrails. So that's, you know, if you can find different handrails to use that are still obvious, helping them to learn more map features. Use a fence if you can. Use a stream if you can. That helps them, that helps the white person to learn more of the features that are available both on the map and in the terrain. Okay, let's look at some examples. So here's a white course from a ranking event that we did last year. Are there any questions before I talk about this more? Okay. Make sure nobody is anybody putting anything there. Okay, we're good. All right. So this is an example of a white course.
I think
Yeah.
you have a question coming in from Misha.
Okay.
It looks like he's typing something.
Okay.
I'm muting again.
Okay. So Misha asks, which parks can you choose? You can choose any park that will give you permission and that you can get a good map of. This particular map that I'm showing right now is a Girl Scout camp. So we asked the Girl Scouts if it was okay for us to do events there, and they said yes, and then we made a map of it. Depending upon your local area, you might have a local park that for something small you can go to and you don't even need permission. Or you might need to ask and get a permit. A lot of places want you to pay some money for a permit if you're going to do an event. It depends how many people a lot of the time too. For a white course specifically, if you want it to be good for beginners, then it needs to have some trail network for them to follow and be simple, have something simple enough for them to do. There are some places out in the woods, at least around here, where there's, lots of open woods, but very few trails, and it can be very difficult in those cases to have a beginner course. So this is at, like I said, Camp Sherman. So this was a ranking event. So the white course, you'll first see that the variety of things we have in the descriptions. There's a building, then there's a couple path junctions, then there's a tank, a fence, traffic island, another building. So try to use different things. So again, we start here. They're facing up the trail. Follow the trail. Somebody else here. Who's this? Follow the trail. You get to this decision point, which is we're having to know to turn. And so I didn't put the control right at the path junction. I put it on the building. So from this junction, you can see the control on the building. By the time you've gone to that control, you're already sort of pushing that person down this trail. So they don't have to think hard about which direction to go. And it kind of helped them to turn that corner. And then continue down the trail. By the time you get into here, this area here has a big open kind of dirt area. It's drawn brown. It's not actually paved there. It's just a larger dirt area. It probably would be more appropriately yellow. But it's kind of where the trails come together. And you can see how the circle is sort of pushed off a little bit over here to the east. So that control was kind of on the edge of the trail junction here on the east, right? So I made a point of putting the control on the east side of this trail to push the fact that you would go to the one that was to the right. If you put the control right here in the middle, then you run the risk that the person doesn't recognize whether they're going on the right trail or the left trail. They might go this way. So by making sure that the placement of the control was to the left, I ensured that the white people would take the proper trail out of there. And then number 3 was also at a path junction. Oh, look, they removed our 40-minute time limit. Yay. So here we had a chance to, again, kind of put the control on this right side of the road so that would help people to turn right. At number 4, so the junction is actually here, but the control was on this tank. So as you got to the junction, you could see the control up on the tank. And by the time you're at the tank, it's already forced you to go the proper direction on this road. Followed the road. And then here at number 5, rather than put it on a junction, I put it on this fence, which again kind of pushed the idea of turning to the right, and also gave people a different control, a different thing to notice on the map. Oh yeah, there is this little line. What is that? That was that fence. If you're paying attention to your map, kind of pushes that issue. Here there was a little bit more decision making to do, because now you have to recognize to make this turn after finding the fence. To the best of my knowledge, we didn't have any issues with anybody accidentally going down the trail the wrong way. And there were a lot of people going this way. Number 6 was a water stop that was on every single course. So lots of people were headed in this direction to that spot. So get your water, up the trail. Again, once you get in here, this gets a little, you know, here there was a little bit of decision making for the white course to make sure that they at least kept going in basically the right direction. Whether you went right or left, you would eventually get to a point where you'd find the traffic island and hit to number 7. So that's a unique thing to be able to give a little bit of route choice on a white course. That's not very common. And then from 7, going straight up the trail to where again you saw a building, and then to the finish. And the finish banner was hung so that as you approached it from either of these trails, you would easily see the banner. So we didn't have to worry about people not knowing to turn this way or anything like that. So there's an example of a white course. Any questions about that? Okay.
Where is the parking?
The parking was this lot here.
Okay.
So this was the parking lot, and then after parking, people walked down this road to here, and this building was registration and results and finish and everything. So, and from here you could pretty much see a start banner there. This is pretty open terrain, so people, it was easy to get to the start, and then after the finish we streamered this route back to here. This was where download happened and results and awards and everything.
And the hash marks that are in red?
That is an out of bounds area. So this is where a ranger lives. So they just don't want people going into the house.
Thank you.
So yeah, this area here is out of bounds because it's got an electric fence around it. Although the fence no longer is electrified, but it's an orchard that they don't want people trampling in. Okay. All right, let's talk about yellow. So on yellow, the keyword is decision. So the main difference in moving up from white to yellow is that you want people to actually have to read their map and make some decisions off of it. Here in Los Angeles, we call the yellow course intermediate. A lot of people use that word for orange and call yellow advanced beginner. I really like calling yellow intermediate because it forces both the course setter and the competitor to think of it as more than just a glorified white course. It shouldn't be. If you make the yellow course too easy, then the jump from yellow to orange is too difficult. So I think it's important to think of the yellow as sort of that intermediate step from traveling all on handrails to learning how to get out into the woods a little bit, because when you get to orange, you really want people doing a significant amount of off-trail navigation. So the other reason to call it intermediate is because, at least in the United States, intermediate students do the yellow course. So I think it's nice that those two things line up, that the intermediate class runs the intermediate course. Winning time here, 25 to 40 minutes. It's very common for people on yellow, if they're not well developed, to take an hour to an hour and a half. 3 to 4K. I would only go with 4K in fairly flat terrain that isn't too difficult. I try to usually make my yellow course in the low 3 to 3.5K range. The legs should still mostly follow handrails, right? It should be possible for the yellow competitor to get from one control to another by following handrails. Doesn't necessarily have to be a trail, but they should have something they can follow. But with the control, preferably off the handrail. As much as possible, try to make the controls not be right next to your trail and require people to make decisions. So in this case, you don't want those controls to be at the path junction. You want at the path junction for them to have to make a decision which direction to go to be on the right path to get to that control. The handrails might not be trails, but should still be reasonably easy to follow. Fences and streams, things like that. So a way to think about we're going to, for control here, is you want the yellow people to have to find an attack point on the handrail. So maybe you get to a path junction, and from there you can see a boulder, but the control will be on the back side of the boulder. So you're getting to that junction, you say, oh, I know I must be close. I'm looking for a boulder. I look in the right direction. Look, there's the boulder. Okay, I need to go to that boulder. Then I should be able to find my flag once I get there. That requires that decision-making process to come into play and to really be reading the map and figuring out what those features are. If possible, add route choice. Especially good if you can add ways to encourage people to get off of trails. It's best if they don't have to do that. If it's really small, you can require it. If you have two trails that get pretty close together and where you can almost see one from the other, and require people to jump from one trail to a next, that's okay. But in general, you want to try to make it possible to stay on trails or handrails to get to things. But if you can find a way to encourage people to cut the trail and get out into the woods, that helps with that comfortableness. Try to have a good catching feature behind a control if possible, especially if it's not that obvious of a feature so catching feature means as you approach the control, if you, for some reason you miss it and go too far, you'll run into something that will stop you. There's a fence back there. There's another trail back there. There's a building. There's something you're going to see that's going to make you say, oops, I must have gone too far. And more than anything, make sure it's not just a longer white course. And if possible, try to make sure it doesn't follow the same route that the white course did. Because a lot of times people will do the white, think that was too easy. Now I want to do something else. They'll want to go out on yellow. If yellow is really just following the same trails, they won't feel like they got a different experience. Also on yellow, you need to worry about helping them to move up to orange eventually. So you want to do that by thinking about what features people need to look at to find the control. Try to use more vegetation features and landform features. Now I want to be careful in saying that. Somebody running the yellow course should not have to understand the contour lines to be able to find their control. But you can still use the fact that there is a landform feature to help teach them how to read those contour lines. So an example might be a hilltop. That's a really good yellow feature. I get to a path junction maybe, and off to the right of that path, there's a hill. I say hilltop, I put the control up there. The orienteer doesn't have to understand how those brown lines are showing that hill, because if I'm at that attack point and I go to my right and I have a description that says hill, I have no doubt that what I have to do is climb up to the top of that thing. I don't have to know that those brown lines are showing it to me to know how to get to that control. But the fact that the brown lines are there, as I'm reading my map, will show me, oh, okay, now I see how on the map that is a hill. So it's a way to kind of help teach people how to read the contours without them having to understand them yet. Reentrance, a lot of times there are trail bends into reentrance, especially here in California. That's really common. We have steep terrain. The trail bends as it goes through reentrant. So you can put a control in the reentrant just a little bit up from the trail bend, maybe just far enough that you can't quite see it. It's behind a little bush or something. They've got that nice attack point of the trail bend. You call it reentrant. They might not know exactly what a reentrant is, but now they're going to learn. They're going to look at it. They're going to say, what's a reentrant? They're going to get there. They're going to know, well, I'm at this trail bend. If I keep going in that direction, I should find a control, and they'll kind of see what they're in. That'll help teach them what's a reentrant. And also think about that in describing controls. You put a control on a hilltop. If there's a trail going over that hilltop, call it hilltop. Don't call it trail. Because again, that forces the issue of that they're on a hill and what that means. As much as possible, try to have your control features be off of the trail. Not a lot off the trail, enough that from the feature, they can see the trail. From the trail, they can see the feature. But again, getting comfortable moving through the terrain. So if you can, add some safe off-trail travel. I did break my own rule a couple years ago at Mount Pinos, where I had a leg on the yellow that went through the woods to a place where there was a huge catching trail. Like the trail made a 90-degree bend. The control was right at that 90-degree bend. So basically there was a 180-degree direction where if you went that way at all, you eventually hit that trail and then could easily find the bend in it. And we didn't have anybody who got lost on that leg going through the woods for a while. But you need to be very careful if you're gonna require going through the woods on a yellow course. So let's look at yellow course. So here's the yellow course from this same event. So from the start, right, they go through the same as the white, but no control here. So they have to decide what to do at this thing. And then there's a boulder, and you'll see the description says that the control is on the southeast side of that boulder. So that's this side over here. So as you approach this way, there's no way you would see that control. You're going to be the most successful if you recognize the boulder first. If you pass the boulder, that control probably was visible from here. So if you're not really sure and you're keeping your eyes out, you'd see it once you passed it. And it's a little bit off the trail, so you have to go through a little bit of grass and stuff there to get to that boulder. Then again, getting from 1 to 2, there's a decision area through here. You're going to have to make decisions going through all these buildings and things. You're going to have to kind of count buildings. Notice I put it on the very, very southernmost buildings. So that way there's not too much work in trying to decide which of these buildings it is. You just keep going until you're almost at the end of all the buildings. As an attack point, you have this area here where the trail kind of opens up. And then it was on the west corner, which again is this one. It's kind of the further away corner. Probably from down here, if you went this far, you would have seen it. But from this area where you're most likely to attack from, you would have had to gotten around to this side of the building before you would see the control. And that's a pretty good distance up through the woods and kind of up a hill a little bit to that building. Then 3, here's where I've used a control feature that's landform hill. So again, you have to make decisions through here, figuring out how to get to where this is. And then you've got what's both an obvious hill on the map and in the terrain. You could see the control on there from this trail. But it really helps point out to an orienteer who's just learning what a hill is going to look like on a map. There's this brown circle. Okay, that's a hill. Here we've got some route choice, whether you're going to go left or right around the lake. Okay, pretty obvious lake, so that's a pretty easy thing to tell what you're doing. Get here between the boulders. Now by now, right, so the white course went this way. So we're already, just at number 2, we're already off of the way that the white course went and doing some different things. 4 to 5 is Rocky Hill. So it's another hill. Again, you've got to figure out how to get from here back to a trail. You could go this direction. You could maybe try to go between this other lake. There's an obvious lake here, so you got a big catching feature on your way out. This kind of is a nice little off-trail route if people tried to do that to get through to this trail. So they need to find their way down to here, come down. You've got some little buildings here to use as an attack point to get into this little hill. And that control, I think, was pretty visible from these buildings here. Then 6 is re-entrant. So again, we're using a landform feature. So again, you've got some decisions to make, getting onto the right trails, getting out to the road. Obviously, road's pretty big catching feature. And once you're on the road, as long as you're going the right direction, this control was right on the east side of this fence where you could kind of, I'm trying to remember if you could reach it through if you could touch it through the fence or if you had to actually cross the fence to get to it. But kind of pointed out the idea of what a re-entrant was. Then decision making to number 7, turning the corner. Here where the white went straight up the trail, the yellow goes off a little bit across. So this is a very grassy area, very open. just finding the right building, corner of the building. And then you've got a couple different trails you can to go through here. You have to find a trail, get out to the buildings, and then figure out how to get from the buildings to this was a little drinking fountain. And it even says that in here, drinking fountain. And then you have a choice of which one of these 2 trails you're going to run to get to the finish. So that's my yellow course. And that's everything I'm going to cover today. Are there any other questions?
Hey, Claire, how long would this take you? Just curious, like designing one of these courses.
Well, I've got a lot of experience and have done this for a while. If all I was doing was setting a white course, that usually takes me probably less than a half an hour of prep work, you know, with the map, and then about an hour out in the field doing that. Yellow course takes a little bit longer because it's a little bit longer just to hike it. But yeah, I usually figure I can do a white course in about an hour in the terrain. If you're doing a full set of courses, like if I'm doing a full, 6 or 7 courses up through red, then usually the day that I go to tag, I plan on it taking 3 to 5 hours. But some people take a lot longer than me. I know. I mean, it depends. If you're a runner and a good navigator, then you can do it a lot faster. If you're, because I usually walk. I don't walk super fast, but I'm a very, very efficient and accurate navigator, and I'm often setting on maps that I know well. So I usually move pretty quickly from one control to the next without getting lost or anything like that.
And tagging means?
Tagging means putting something physical at the proposed control location so that you can find it again later. Usually I use survey marking tape, like the pink or the orange, and I'll bring a Sharpie with me and I'll write on it. Usually on my tags, I write the name of the club, LAOC, the date of the event, so that if for some reason the tag doesn't get removed and somebody finds it later, they can tell that the date has passed, it's not needed anymore. And then the code of the control I plan to put there. If I haven't figured out the control codes yet, then I might just put, the course a number, like, oh, this is orange number 1 or whatever. If it has that information on it, if it has the control code on it, that makes it easier than if somebody goes to set the control that isn't me. Because then they can find that tag, it has the control code, they know that they're at the place where that control goes.
Thank you.
So how do we get them to learn contours? I know you mentioned something about, putting something on a hilltop to where they might look, oh, look, all the contours are in a circle, concentric circles.
Mm-hmm.
But we're eventually trying to get people to jump up from yellow to orange.
Right. So there's 3 aspects to getting somebody to learn contours. One is in your yellow course design, including a certain number of contour-based features in yellow courses to kind of teach people that. The second is in your orange course design, in the way that you design the orange, making sure that while people are trying to get better at reading contours, that they still have safe catching features and other things to help them get from their attack points to where they're going without getting horribly lost, right? When we get to orange, which we'll do next week, you'll see that my keyword for that is safety. And then the third way is to try to offer training opportunities for people that aren't just doing a course. Like we have our Sherman training weekend every year where you can get training specifically in how to read those things with a coach and that kind of thing. So, we also want to encourage people to talk to experts after every course, to get course reviews, to ask questions, and to learn those kind of things in those ways as well.
Okay.
Anything else? Okay, great. Well, thank you all for coming, and I got to get ready for my next one. So if you weren't aware of it, there is another seminar starting at 1 o'clock, which is a skills seminar for beginners. So it's just the basic stuff that you would kind of teach at a like at a beginner instruction at a meet, that kind of thing. So if you need that, or if you just want to see what I cover, you're welcome to be at that as well.
How do we find that link?
If you don't already have it, if you go to the Los Angeles Orienteering Club website, so that's losangelesorienteering.org, and then click on Sunday Skills Seminar, and the link should be there.
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
All right, great. Thank you, Claire.
Thank you,
Okay.
Claire.
Okay, thanks, Claire.
All right. Thank you, everybody.
Не буду, наверное.
Ну, это то же самое.
Okay. What do I do now? How do I stop this? Oh, there it is. End meeting. There we go. That's it.